Buckle up, because the UK government just borrowed more money in September than it has in any September for the last 5 years. This alarming jump in borrowing paints a concerning picture for the Chancellor as they gear up for the upcoming budget next month. But here's where it gets controversial. Are these borrowing levels truly sustainable, or are we heading for a financial cliff? Here's the breakdown. According to the Office for National Statistics, ONS, the government borrowed a whopping £20.2 billion in September. To put it simply, that's the difference between what the government spent and what it earned in taxes. This figure is £1.6 billion higher than what was borrowed in September of the previous year. A primary driver for this increase? Rising debt interest payments, which essentially canceled out any gains from increased tax and national insurance contributions. Think of it like this. You get a raise at work, but then your rent goes up even more. You're still worse off. And it doesn't stop there. Over the first 6 months of the financial year, total government borrowing has ballooned to £99.8 billion, a staggering £11.5 billion higher than the same period last year. This adds significant pressure on Chancellor Rachel Reeves, who is widely expected to introduce tax increases in the November budget to stay within her self-imposed fiscal rules. The big question is, who will bear the brunt of these tax hikes? And this is the part most people miss. How will those tax increases impact economic growth? While September's borrowing figure was slightly below analyst predictions, £20.8 billion, it was just a hair above the £20.1 billion projected by the Office for Budget Responsibility, OBR, back in March. Paul Dales, chief economist at Capital Economics, told the BBC's Today program that the Chancellor would love tax receipts to be higher, but that hinges on faster economic growth. Capital Economics is forecasting that the government will need to raise a substantial £27 billion in the budget, with higher taxes on households having to do the heavy lifting. Ouch! In an attempt to stimulate economic growth ahead of the budget, the government has announced several initiatives. For example, at the Regional Investment Summit in Birmingham, Reeves plans to unveil reforms aimed at cutting red tape and paperwork, which she claims will save companies nearly £6 billion annually. The idea is to make it easier for businesses to operate and invest, thereby boosting the economy. But will these measures be enough to offset the impact of potential tax increases? Although tax income did increase in September compared to last year, partly due to higher employer national insurance contributions, government spending also rose. This was fueled by pay raises, inflation driving up day-to-day running costs, and inflation-linked increases to state benefits. On top of that, the government shelled out £9.7 billion on debt interest payments, a whopping £3.8 billion increase from the same month last year. This is a critical point. Are we simply borrowing more money to pay off existing debt, creating a vicious cycle? As a result, public sector debt in the UK is now estimated at 95.3% of gross domestic product, GDP, a level not seen since the early 1960s. This is a crucial metric because it shows how much debt the country has relative to the size of its economy. A high debt-to-GDP ratio can signal potential economic instability. Responding to these worrying figures, Chief Secretary to the Treasury James Murray stated that the government would never play fast and loose with the public finances and reiterated its commitment to reducing borrowing to free up funds for essential services like the NHS, schools, and police. However, Shadow Chancellor Mel Stride painted a very different picture, accusing the Labour government of losing control of public finances and burdening future generations with debt. Liberal Democrat Treasury spokeswoman Daisy Cooper echoed these concerns, stating that alarm bells should be ringing for the government ahead of the budget, and criticizing both the Conservatives' past handling of the economy and the current government's policies. Which narrative do you believe? Are current policies addressing the root cause of this debt, or simply applying a temporary fix? Finally, it's worth noting that the ONS figures include a correction to previous data due to an error in how VAT receipts were initially calculated. This highlights the importance of accurate data in economic analysis and policymaking. So with all this in mind, I have to ask, what are your thoughts on the government's current borrowing situation? Are you optimistic about the upcoming budget? And what measures do you think the Chancellor should prioritize to address the growing debt burden? Share your opinions in the comments below.